Italy as a nation today is still relatively young with age, being only about 160 years old since its unification. But before that, it was comprised of many different territories and kingdoms, which were all divided and had no interest in unification. For centuries, Italy was ruled by foreign powers and local kings who guarded their own lands jealously. The Austrian Empire controlled the wealthy north, the Pope ruled the central states, and the south was under the Bourbon kings. This fragmented landscape made it hard for Italians to identify as a single people, posing a major challenge to unification. So what finally sparked the movement to bring Italy together? What exactly caused Italian unification? After Napoleon's defeat in 1815 at the Battle of Waterloo, Europe held a conference in Vienna stating that, hey, we should not try to challenge each other and leave everything as it is, as Europe is balanced now. For Italy, this was difficult, as if they did try to unify, most of Europe would definitely try and stop it from happening. In a nutshell, Italy, or the Italian peninsula, was still fragmented into different parts, with their own identities and cultures. However, despite this, nationalism was still on the rise, and the desire for the unification of the peninsula. But how do you exactly unite a land full of people who've never been united before? Well, you just need one man to light the spark. And that man was Giuseppe Mazzini, a thinker from Genoa who believed that Italy should be a united democratic republic. He founded Young Italy in 1831, a secret society aimed at stirring up revolution across the peninsula. To some, he was a visionary. To others, a troublemaker. To the Austrians, a wanted man. But Mazzini's rebellions, like the attempted uprisings in Piedmont in the 1830s, were often crushed. The other two key figures were Count Cavour and Giuseppe Garibaldi, and they couldn't have been more different from Mazzini or from each other. Cavour was the politician, the master of chessboard diplomacy. As the Prime Minister of Piedmont, Sardinia, he focused on building up a strong modern state that could lead the unification of Italy from the top down. Then there was Garibaldi, the fighter, a bearded red-shirted legend who had spent years fighting revolutions not just in Italy but in South America. Together, Cavour the brain, Garibaldi the sword, and Mazzini the soul, they would, despite all odds, push Italy towards unification. They just had to wait for the right moment. And whoops, guess what? Their neighbor France is in another revolution, which also kind of took the whole of Europe with it. The revolutions of 1848 is kind of a complex topic and is a bit too much to cover in this video. But essentially, after the Napoleonic Wars, the coalition reinstated the Bourbon monarchy. And now King Louis Philippe, the King of France, was in charge. Then they banned people from meeting for banquets or something like that, and then France exploded into revolution, with the deposition of the old monarchy and France becoming a presidential republic. And their first president was none other than Louis not Emperor yet Napoleon, elected in 1848. Well, revolutions are contagious. France sneezes and all of Europe catches it. Uprisings popped off across the continent, and Italy wasn't going to miss its chance. Inspired by the chaos in France, Italians took to the streets, demanding constitutions, national unity, and an end to foreign rule. Even Rome got swept up in the momentum. Revolutionaries kicked out the Pope and declared a Roman Republic in 1849, with Mazzini playing a key role. It didn't last long though. French troops marched in, crushed the Republic, and then restored the Pope's rule. Still, it just showed how far the Italians were willing to go in the name of unification. At the same time, the Kingdom of Piedmont Sardinia took the fight to the Austrians, launching what became known as the First War of Italian Independence. But despite the patriotic energy, the war did not go well. The Austrians, led by very capable Field Marshal Radetzky, a veteran of the Napoleonic Wars, crushed the Piedmontese forces at Custoza and again at Novara in 1849. This defeat caused the king, Charles Albert, to abdicate in favour of his son, Victor Emmanuel II. But there goes the chances of a unified Italy. But not to worry, they would try again 2 more times. Victor was a bit different, not as idealistic, not as impulsive, but more willing to play the long game. And most importantly, he had someone brilliant working behind the scenes, Count Cavour, the Prime Minister of Piedmont Sardinia. Cavour also knew that if Italy was going to have another shot at unification, they'd need help from a major power. And lucky them, in 1853, the Russians and the Ottomans were butting heads again, and with French and British support, they joined the Ottoman side and hoped that either the French or British would help them in their crusade for independence. They got the French. So you see, Louis Napoleon, who was president in 1848, decided to become emperor and launched the coup in 1852 and was now known as Napoleon III. To gain French support, Cavour struck a deal and offered the regions of Nice and Savoy for their support against the Austrians. Austria, anticipating a war, struck first and they invaded the Piedmontese, kicking off the Second War of Italian Independence in 1859. But they were halted just outside the capital of Turin. Then French forces showed up and pushed them back all the way until Austrian occupied Lombardy, Venetia, and defeated them at the Battle of Solferino. The war then ended. Austria lost its territories in Lombardy to the Piedmontese, while the minor states in the center of Italy revolted, united, invaded, and annexed a part of the Papal States and then joined the Piedmontese. 2 attempts down, 1 more to go. After the war, many smaller states were eager to join Piedmont Sardinia, but their rulers not so much, especially in the south, where the Kingdom of Two Sicilies was still ruled by the Bourbon dynasty, who were very much not on board with the idea of unification. That's when Giuseppe Garibaldi stepped in. In May 1860, he sailed from the north with about 1,000 redshirted volunteers and landed in Sicily, where surprisingly, he faced almost no resistance. Garibaldi swept through the island, then crossed to the mainland and marched north, eventually ousting the Bourbon king and taking control of the entire south. He even had his eyes set on Rome, planning to march into the Papal States next. But Cavour, ever the schemer, got nervous. He didn't want Garibaldi gaining too much influence or dragging Piedmont into a war with France. So instead, Cavour sent the Piedmontese army to occupy parts of the Papal States first, cutting Garibaldi off. Garibaldi would then meet with King Victor Emmanuel II and offer his conquest. So now the majority of Italy was unified under Piedmont Sardinia. The name would then be changed to the Kingdom of Italy in 1861. However, they still didn't have Austrian Venice and Papal Rome, which was under French protection. So how would the Italians retake back these lands? By allying themselves with Europe's rising star, the Prussians. You see, Prussia was to unify Germany, but Austria wouldn't allow that. So seeing a potential war, Italy allied with the Prussians and then declared war on the Austrians, kicking off the Third War of Italian Independence, or as it's more famously known as the Austro-Prussian War. Italy got absolutely trashed, but when the Prussians defeated the Austrians, the war was over. And even though Italy didn't exactly earn their victory, they still got Venetia thanks to the treaty. In fact, Austria refused to hand it directly to Italy and instead gave it to France, who then passed it on to Italy. That just left Rome, still under French protection thanks to Napoleon III and his troops stationed in the Papal States. But then, perfect timing, a succession crisis in Spain sparked tensions between France and Prussia, which quickly escalated into the Franco-Prussian War in 1870. Desperate for reinforcements, Napoleon III withdrew his troops from Rome to focus on the war. And the Italians, well, they took this as a sign and basically just walked right in with no French troops to stop them. They took the city with minimal resistance from Papal forces. In 1871, Rome was declared the capital of the Kingdom of Italy, finally completing the unification of the peninsula. So after decades of revolts, diplomacy, and backroom dealings, and straight-up heroic invasions, Italy was finally unified. After centuries of division, foreign rule, and fractured identities, the people of the peninsula were now under one flag, one crown, and one name, Italy. But unification wasn't the end of the story, it was just the beginning. But for the first time in modern history, Italians could call themselves a nation.